Namaste.
Good afternoon. According to Mark Twain, the secret of getting ahead is getting started. With this judicious statement,
हमारी भावी पीढ़ी विचारों से सराबोर है। उनके विचारों को सही दिशा और उचित मंच प्रदान करने के उद्देश्य से शुरू किया गया पाइस टॉक और इस चर्चात्मक बुद्धिपरक कार्यक्रम के दूसरे एपिसोड में
I, Ramesa,
and I, Viana,
will be hosting this informative second episode of Pies Talk. It is an honor to introduce our guest to the second episode of Pies Talk. And here we have with us the very knowledgeable and an excellent orator, Dr. Ved Prakash Mishra, who is also Dr. B.C. Roy Presidential Awardee in 2016. We also welcome the stalwart of our school-level education, Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, Middle East, our respected principal, PICE, Abu Dhabi, Mr. Suresh Balakrishnan.
इसी के साथ ही हमारे साथ जुड़े हमारे ऑनलाइन दर्शक जो इस कार्यक्रम का सीधा प्रसारण देख रहे हैं और जो बाद में देखेंगे, उन सभी का हम स्वागत करते हैं।
Welcome to PICE Talk, November 2022.
हमारे साथ आज प्रमुख अतिथि के रूप में डॉक्टर वेद प्रकाश मिश्रा जी उपस्थित हैं। शैक्षणिक क्षेत्र में आपका सराहनीय योगदान रहा है और आप नियमित अपनी सर्वोत्कृष्ट सेवा इस क्षेत्र को दे रहे हैं। महोदय, आपका परिचय कुछ इस तरह है।
Dr. Ved Prakash Mishra is an awardee of Dr. B.C. Roy Presidential Award in 2016, who is also Doctor of Sciences honoris causa by 7 universities, National Head of Academic Program of Indian Program, UNESCO Chair in Bioethics, half year, and member of International Committee for Bioethics Asia Pacific Region. Chief Advisor to Honorable Chancellor and Krishna Institute of Medical Sciences, Dean to University, Karar. Dean, Academic and Accreditation Board, National Indian Medical Association, New Delhi. Former Chairman, Postgraduate Medical Education Committee, Medical Council of India, New Delhi.
ये एक संक्षिप्त परिचय है हमारे आज के मेहमान डॉक्टर वेद प्रकाश मिश्रा जी का। इसके अतिरिक्त आपको 1000 से अधिक सम्मान, विश्व के प्रतिष्ठित विश्वविद्यालयों में बतौर विषय विशेषज्ञ के मार्गदर्शक, विश्वविद्यालयों की विभिन्न इकाइयों में आपका योगदान भी आपके परिचय के साथ जुड़ा है। हमारे लिए गर्व का विषय है कि आप जैसा बहुमुखी व्यक्तित्व हमारे साथ उपस्थित है। महोदय, आपके परिचय के साथ ही हम आपका स्वागत करते हैं और आमंत्रित करते हैं हमारे आज के पाइस टॉक शो के दूसरे संस्करण के विद्यार्थी डेलीगेट्स को।
Our student delegates are Sagarika and Archit from grade 11, Ayush and Sakib from grade 9. We also welcome our delegates on this SPICE talk. And the topic for this session is National Education Policy 2022, New Perspective in Education.
जैसा कि आप सभी जानते हैं कि वर्ष 2020 में नई शिक्षा नीति को लागू किया गया है। इस शिक्षा नीति के उद्देश्य क्या हैं? इसके दूरगामी परिणाम क्या होंगे? इसके विविध पहलुओं की बारीक जानकारी व समझ के लिए बिना किसी देरी के डॉक्टर वेद प्रकाश मिश्रा जी के अनुमति से आज के इस स्पाइस टॉक के दूसरे एपिसोड में प्रवेश करते हैं।
So can we start?
You want me to begin?
Oh,
No, I did not get you, beta.
Sir, हम शुरू करें प्रोग्राम?
हाँ जरूर करिए बेटा, जरूर करें।
I would like to invite Ayush to ask his first question for the second episode of Pies Talk.
नमस्कार आदरणीय महोदय, मेरा नाम आयुष बिसॉय है। We have been enthusiastically discussing about making India a world power. APJ Abdul Kalam had also stated his views on this topic in his Vision 2020. How can NEP 2020 push India towards becoming a world power?
Well, the greatest philosopher of the modern times and former President of India, Dr. Abdul Kalam ji, very rightly said that India is most blessed in the context of a material fact that we are a young population, and this youth population is the greatest demographic dividend that is there at our disposal. The real asset of our growth and supremacy, and the way forward also he indicated. If I'm tempted to quote him right, he said, quote, just as 19th century belonged to Britishers because of colonial imperialism, just as 20th century belonged to Americans because of the technological supremacy, in the same vein, 21st century shall belong to India by virtue of the demographic dividend that it has in its fold. And the only way forward for this global supremacy in 21st century for Mother India lies in conversion of this demographic dividend, that is the young population, into precious human resource, unquote. The need is that the young population has to be converted into a precious human resource. What is the way forward for that conversion? The way forward for that conversion is, again, he demonstrated, the wings have to be put on fire. And those wings have to be put on through a process of ignition of the young minds, igniting them so that they illuminate with a glow, and the illuminated glow glows the world. This is the simple path that he described. How exactly this path can be put across into translational reality is a million-dollar question. And I trust and believe that National Education Policy Document 2020, which has been brought out by the Government of India, in terms of the education policy, is almost after 34 years from 1986. The important aspect which is catering to this particular cause, according to me, are fourfolds. Number one, what are the pillars on which this particular policy is based on? There are 4 pillars of this policy, and all these pillars, they cater to the cause which the question has been posed. The first pillar is access. Education must be accessible to every young child, and this young child should be in the domain of education for all levels, primary, secondary, tertiary, and advanced levels of learning. If you look the scenario today, speaking for higher education, even today, the gross enrollment ratio for higher education in country is only 26%, which goes to indicate that only those 26 out of every 100 who are otherwise eligible, only 26 are in a position to be in the portals of higher education, which goes to indicate that access is one of the important limiting factors for the education in this country at all levels, be it primary, secondary, tertiary, or any level of education. It is still beyond the reach of the people. Still, the learners, the young generations have not been brought into its fold, and therefore the conversion of the demographic dividend into precious human resource through the aegis of education, which is the only modality. If 1/4 of the population is only within its fold, imagine whether we are squandering the human resource or whether we are judiciously transforming the human resource, turns out to be a million-dollar question. Therefore, the policy focuses on access. Every learner should be in a position to be getting the education that is his legitimate right in terms of 2009 amendment, where education has been made as a fundamental right under Chapter 3 of the Constitution of India. Second important aspect is equity. Equity is the hallmark of access. A society which is divided by n number of socio-economic considerations. Without equity, education will turn out to be a monopoly of few. In order to avoid that the monopolization of the education does not take place, it reaches everybody beyond any precincts of caste, color, creed, faith, belief, geographic location, economic status. It becomes available and easily accessible to everyone at its doorsteps, turns out to be the second important aspect of equity. Equity and access have to be blended with the third important dimension, because right to education does not mean only right to education. It means right to quality education. Therefore, quality turns out to be the important cardinal consideration, and therefore ensuring that it is the quality education which is required to be there. Therefore, access, equity, quality, and the fourth pillar is accountability. State as a modality has to be accountable. Society as a whole has to bear this accountability, that it is our responsibility to ensure that the young children, young generations of this country are able to be transformed into precious human resource. And therefore, the first indication which I am wanting to put across with whatever little understanding at my dispensation is that National Education Policy 2020, the four pillars on which it stands, I think they are sumptuous enough to indicate that it's a policy which is expected to be catering to the cause of transformation of young generation, the demographic dividends into precious human resource, the path which has been kindled by, rather the only path kindled by Dr. Abdul Kalam ji, that this is the only way to global supremacy of Mother India. And I think in terms of the four pillars of the policy and NEP 2020 being based on, it becomes loud and clear that here is a frame which is capable of catering to this larger cause. That's my understanding on the formulation of NEP in regard to its four pillars and the edifice on which it stands.
धन्यवाद सर। आयुष के इस प्रश्न पर प्राप्त उत्तर के समय अब हम आमंत्रित करते हैं अर्चित को।
Greetings, sir. My question to you is, if the new system is independent of rank, how does a student evaluate his position or capabilities in comparison to his peers?
Basically, this is one of the important facets of the NEP 2020, wherein this provides immense degree of flexibility. The rigidity which was the hallmark of education in vogue, that is intended to be removed, or that is intended to be altered through an immense flexibility. Where exactly that flexibility is to be? The flexibility in terms of segmented nature of all levels of education being converted into a cafeteria approach. Open electives, subject electives, multidisciplinary character, lateral entry, collateral exits, all these are the special features which go to indicate that there is absolute degree of flexibility which is incorporated in the system itself at various levels. It's not only assessment which is expected to be an end certification assessment. Assessment is expected to be dependent on a modality which we call as not isolated, formative, and end result summative to be integrated into two. It is a 360-degree assessment. And that 360-degree assessment, which is going to be a modality of assessment at all workplaces, at all workstations, in a manner which is free-flowing in nature. Therefore, the learner's onus is not isolated to end result certification. He is required to be continuously in the phase of learning which is liberal in nature and character, in learning which is integrated in nature, in learning which is devoid of segmentation, in learning which is absolutely facilitatory in character, in learning which is competency and skill based, in learning which is totally subjected to assessment, in learning where the assessment is there for every unit of activity at all levels. It is going to make the learner a responsible learner, B, a learner who is accountable, and C, a learner who is assessed practically for every unit of activity which he or she is required to be undertaking. Therefore, believe me, it is not just altering the face of learning. It's not just altering the facet of modality. It is going to result in the entire perspective and entire process of learning itself, which is supposed to be, or which is expected to be, free, fair, round the clock or round the year, unitary assessment based, and the learning is going to be totally assessment driven, that assessment which is not going to be stringently competitive in terms of quantification, but it will be in terms of competency based, credit based assessment system. And those credits which will be open for retention, those credits which will be open for carry forward, those which can be added up in terms of lateral exit and collateral entries, and these credits would be based on internationalized parlance, opening the pace and facet of internationalization of the education at all levels in terms of transferable credits. In order to ensure that the learning is not monocentric and monolithic in character, open electives. It is not that the mathematics cannot be linked with dancing, music. It can be. Therefore, the boredom of mathematics cannot be, is not mandated to be required to be sustained. It can be blended with choice-based electives, open electives, free electives, which will be also catering to the cause of learning being a pleasuresome experience in a cafeteria approach. Therefore, let me put it across. Of course, the operational document on these particular policy indications not having come out, I am only bringing out the principal features which are inbuilt in the policy document. Maybe operational document will be in a position to elucidate all these things with a greater degree of clarity and operation. But presently, I can definitely put across that the document is a harbinger of all these openings which I have tried to put across, because they are inbuilt into the descriptive indications of the policy document of NEP 2020.
Thank you, sir. Moving on, I would like to invite Radhika to ask her next question.
Good afternoon. My name is Monica. Here is my first question. What will change in the next 10 years with the implementation of NEP in higher education?
Look, the changes in higher education, according to me, are going to be most rapid, most visible, and they will be absolutely resulting in gross alteration of the educational system. I bring out only three features. Number one, the nature of the universities or categorization of the institutions, higher educational institutions in this country. In terms of NEP, it will be categorized only into three categories. A, universities which will be research based, category 1. Exclusively committed to research and innovation by itself is expected to be a class of universities. 2, those which are teaching and also research institutions, which will be a mix of teaching and research. Only research, category 1. Teaching and research, category 2. And all institutions will be autonomous with a right to confer the degrees. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, higher education will be the first proposition of a genuine autonomy. Purely research-based entry in universities in category 1, teaching and research universities in category 2, and number 3, all autonomous institutions with the right to confer the degrees. Therefore, categorization in coming 10 years is the most significant change which I am able to see. Likewise, the second change is education will be in continuum. This continuum will be that the graduation program, which instead of 3 years is expected to be 4 years. And each year of the graduation is segregated into defined competencies. Like a 4-year program, at the end of 1 year, I am in a position to opt out with a certificate where the competencies are defined. In case I want to pursue it for 2 years, I am entitled to be out with an undergraduate diploma. If I am pursuing for all 4 years, if I am pursuing for 3 years, it will be a graduate degree. If 4 years, it will be a graduate degree with honors, which goes to indicate that the ladder is inbuilt within the course itself. I can exit out because of my situations and circumstances, retain the credit, and at a later point of go back, join the program where I have left, whereby even an intermittent progression is possible for me. Therefore, that is the second. Therefore, in other words, That segmentation, which was monolithic in character, where end certification was there for a degree or diploma at the end of it, today it has been fragmented, rightly so, in terms of certification at each level, in the form of a certificate course, in the form of a diploma course, in the form of honor, in the form of a degree course, in the form of an honors degree course. Second important change. Honors degree will result in a post-graduation program which will be of only 1 year duration. Therefore, 4 plus 1, 5, the specialized postgraduate degree is available. It will be linked with doctoral degree program. Therefore, the continuum which is available is from undergraduate program to postgraduate program to doctoral degree program in continuum and with lateral exits and collateral entries, free flowing in nature and character. The assessment will be totally credit based. Credit based assessment ensures A, accumulation of credits, B, retention of credits, C, transfer of credits. All this will be through what is called as an academic credit bank. There will be a bank where the credits will be. It will be as if the credits earned by the learner, they will be absolutely his deposition in the bank, which will be availed whenever he is wanting to avail them. And these credits will be in terms of international parlance, making the currency of credits valid in international parlance, giving them the status of international credits. That is the second important change which I am seeing down the line for 10 years. The third most important change is today the entire higher educational frame is singularly monolithic based. There is no multidisciplinary character. If I am a student of medicine, medicine is the only arena I am wanting to eschew. I have no taste of social sciences. I have no taste of history. I have no taste of geography. I have no taste of art. I have no taste of liberal art. I have no taste of any juridical positions in regard to law. And therefore, here is a proposition where this regimented, segmented character of higher education is open for multidisciplinary integration, including provision for optional and core electives in a free cafeteria approach. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, three important changes in the higher education which I am able to visualize, which are capable of giving it absolutely a new phase. These are the three important changes which I visualize to be a game changer in the entire scenario, and also emphasis on important prescription of the integrated syllabi and regulation of higher education. It will be a single monolithic governance which will be there in the form of National Higher Education Commission, which will be the apical regulatory body with 4 arms provided under their end. Therefore, it will be a national regulatory frame which will be put into operation, including accrediting mechanisms will be established at the national level and accreditation will be compulsory, so that the quality centricity and quality certification is totally worked out. The research component is going to be catered in a huge way by creation of a national research fund and a funding authority with a corpus of 1,000 crores for the purpose of every 5-year plan to begin with, which is expected to be giving a huge impetus to the research profiling to be undertaken in the domain of invention, innovation, and newness to be added into the entire array. Therefore, believe me, I have every reason to say national education policy turns out to be a real game changer, opening the path for the India to have its say in the global supremacy by emerging as Vishwaguru in times to come.
धन्यवाद सर। सागरिका के इस सवाल के साथ ही हम आमंत्रित करते हैं साकिब को।
Warm greetings to you, sir. I am Sakib, and my question for you is this. Academically successful foreign countries like Sweden and Finland have the age of starting school education as early as 5 years. What drove the Indian government to issue policies in light of changing the age of starting school education to as early as the age of 2 years?
Look, basically, you're right in saying so. that ultimately why we are catching them not only young, why we are catching them youngest. The tapping which is required in the Indian context in terms of its huge population turns out to be an important factor. Therefore, the policy frame which has been put across is a continuum of school education, wherein the figurative proposition is 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. And it has been worked out in terms of clear-cut decipherence of learning, psych and psychology. The entire program which has been worked out is on the basis that the tagging of the learner which is expected to be worked out in terms of 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 curricular structure is corresponding with the ages. That is, when you are talking of initial 5, it is from 3 years to 8 years of age. When you are talking of plus 3, it is 8 years to 11 years of age. When you are contemplating the second 3, and it is from 11 to 14 years of age. And when it is last 4, it is 14 to 18 years of age. 18 years is the age of gaining adulthood in terms of the Indian laws. And commencement here is third year, that is beginning from the age of 3. So 3 to 18 means it is an educational profiling which has been planned for 15 years in terms of first block being of 5 years, that is 3 years of pre-nursery plus first and second standard. Remaining the next 3 will be into the next block will be progression to next 3 levels. Next 3 will be another 3 levels, and the last 4 is finally that 18 years ending up in terms of an intermediate certification entitling the learner to enter into the portals of higher education. The basic connotation which is required to be put across here is ensuring that the age that is caught up for the purposes of pre-nursery orientation is 3 years, and it is scientifically valid as a medical teacher and as a medical student, as a medical expert, I can put across. The whole process of learning is to begin at a point of time when what we call as process of myelination, that is clothing of the nerves, which is the natural process which goes on, that is over by and large in an average by third year of life, where the child is in a position to have its own grasp in regard to instructional learning, but with a sense of pleasure and joy. And therefore, some justification which is worked up is absolutely scientific in terms of scientific evidence, and planning from third to 18 years is a catching him beyond his infant age as a child to be converted into an adolescent and ending up he gaining adulthood into domain of higher education to experiential learning rather than empirical learning. So I think the contour which has been formulated in the national education policy, forget as an educationist, but even as a medical expert, I can say it is well reasoned out, well founded, and appropriately and adequately justified. It is not disturbing, distorting, or prejudicing the childhood or infant childhood in any manner. On the contrary, it is picking up at the rightest possible age for desired inculcation and progression.
धन्यवाद सर। आप देख रहे हैं वॉइस टॉक शो और इस कार्यक्रम में हमारे साथ भारत से जुड़े हैं डॉक्टर वेद प्रकाश मिश्रा। आप सभी अपने प्रश्न कमेंट के माध्यम से पूछ सकते हैं।
Moving on, I would like to invite Ayush to ask his next question.
नए शिक्षा नीति 2020 में 10+2 प्रारूप के जगह पर 5+3+3+4 प्रारूप का उपयोग किया जा रहा है। शिक्षा नीति पर, शिक्षा व्यवस्था पर ऐसे परिवर्तन का क्या प्रभाव पड़ सकता है?
मैंने आपको मेरे पूर्व प्रश्न के अंतर्गत ही इस बात का उल्लेख बड़े साफ तौर पर किया हुआ है। ये किसी भी प्रकार का आप एक्सपेरिमेंटेशन न माने, इन्हें आप जिसे हम अंग्रेजी में माइलस्टोन्स ऑफ ग्रोथ एंड डेवलपमेंट कहते हैं, ये उनके साथ जुड़ी हुई एक सुचारू रूप से चलने वाली प्रक्रिया है। अभी तक हम उसको नर्सरी, दैट इज फाउंडेशन, प्राइमरी और सेकेंडरी एजुकेशन में डिवाइड करते थे। हमने कभी प्री एडोलेसेंस को कवर ही नहीं किया था। इसके अंतर्गत वो 4 हिस्से कवर हो गए। एक, पोस्ट इन्फेंट, दैट इज 3 इयर्स, जिसके बाद हम 5 साल तक की बात कर रहे हैं, जिसमें जैसा मैंने आपको मेरे पूर्व उत्तर में कहा, 3 वर्ष हम नर्सरी एजुकेशन की बात कर रहे हैं और 2 वर्ष प्राइमरी एजुकेशन की हम बात कर रहे हैं। ये फॉर्मेटिव ईयर्स ऑफ एजुकेशन हो गए। इसके बाद हम और 3 वर्षों का कालखंड, जिसमें कॉन्टेक्चुअल लर्निंग के साथ में हम उसे जोड़ रहे हैं, और 3 उसके बाद जो जुड़ने वाला कालखंड है, वो कॉन्टेक्चुअल के साथ ही एक निश्चित तौर के ऊपर में शैडोड एक्सपीरियंशियल लर्निंग का कंपोनेंट जुड़ता है, और उसके बाद निश्चित तौर पर डोमिनेंट एक्सपीरियंशियल लर्निंग का कंपोनेंट जुड़ जाता है, और एडल्टहुड के बाद एक्सपीरियंशियल लर्निंग के लिए वो पूरी तरीके से तैयार हो जाता है। इसलिए अर्ली चाइल्डहुड, प्री एडोलेसेंट, एडोलेसेंट एंड कमेंसमेंट ऑफ एडल्टहुड, इन 4 प्रारूपों के अंतर्गत इनका जो 15 वर्ष का विभाजन किया गया है, वह अत्यंत निश्चित तौर पर वैज्ञानिक डिमार्केशन के तौर पर आधारित है, और इसलिए यह निश्चित तौर पर किसी प्रकार का केवल एक गणित का ऑल्ट्रेशन ऑफ नंबर्स का एक्सपेरिमेंटेशन ना होकर अत्यंत सोची समझी जिम्मेदारी के साथ प्रतिपादित कालखंड के विभाजन की योजना है, जो केवल औचित्यपूर्ण ही नहीं, वैज्ञानिक तथ्यों के साथ जुड़ी हुई है। इसीलिए इसका उपयुक्त होना स्वाभाविक अतएव नैसर्गिक है।
Thank you, sir. Moving on, I would like to invite Archit to ask his next question.
So my next question would be, according to the new policy, the students can now seek education in their local dialects. But won't this pose a challenge to them when they will seek higher education in Hindi or English?
See, look, basically learning has to be facilitated in a young child. If you make learning difficult, if you make learning tough, if you make learning absolutely plagued by difficulties of decipherence and understanding, learning instead of pleasure could turn out to be a painful experience. John Dewey, the famous educationist, says that learning is best where the learner is able to learn with a sense of joy and pleasure in unison. How do you make learning joyful? How do you make learning pleasuresome? This is a $1 million question. Learning is best in the formative years in your dialect. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, even today, you and me who are capable of speaking English, we speak chaste English, we speak fluent English, we speak grammatically correct English, we speak right dialectics of English are availed by us. Do we understand things in English, or do we understand things learned in English by converting and translating for understanding into our mother tongue? Decipherence for understanding is always in your basic language, which is your primary language. That is the scientific fact which you must always remember. And it is in that context, primary part of learning is expected to be facilitated. And that facilitation is possible if it is in your mother tongue. That does not cause any impediment in regard to that turning out to be an obstacle for any higher education and higher plan, just because your primary learning is in your name. It is for the purposes of facilitation. Best learning is possible in the formative learning, in the initial part of the learning, where learning is to have its ignition if it is put across best in its own mother tongue, in its own dialect. And therefore, that foundational part of learning in the mother tongue is a facilitating move which has been very judicially thought of. To construe that it will be an impediment, I think, is a very far-fetched proposition which does not carry much substance and which is sand logic I can put across with all possible clarity. More so, there is a multiple language formula which has been put across. They have clearly said that there will be a primary language in the given situation, there will be a secondary language, second language, there will be a third language, and a linguistic formula, a basket of language formula has been worked out. But primary teaching for facilitation, if it is in the mother tongue of the child, if it is in the primary dialect, it is a good facilitatory move. And therefore, on that count, I uphold the preposition of initial phase of learning being put into mother's dialect. It is the best move for facilitation of primary learning and initiation of learning in the learner.
Thank you, sir. It was a very informative answer. Moving on, I'd like to invite Sagrika to ask her next question.
Here is my next question. How do you see the budget prepared for education in the NEP 2020? Is proper expenditure being made on education in developing country like India?
Teacher has been one of the greatest bottlenecks when it comes to education in India. Let me take you back to the year 1952, when an expert committee upon the adoption of constitution was adopted, and those recommendations, because they identified 18 cardinal features for the purposes of generation and invocation of welfare state as was enshrined in the constitution and as was put across defined therein. Among the 18 parameters, the first two parameters listed was 1, health, 2, education. I am not going in for the remaining, including health. I am on education. And the most important recommendation which was made was that for invocation of developmental profile of India, in the context of constitutional declaration of invocation of a welfare state, the expenditure which should be made on health and education should be 6% each of the gross domestic produce. 6% of the GDP should be spent on education and 6% of the GDP should be spent on health. Let me put it across. From 1952 till date, we have not been able to appropriate this percentage of GDP allocated to education from 1952 till date. We have been falling short on that particular count, and therefore our appropriation, even in last several years, 5-year plans, has not even crossed 50% of the original recommendation which was made. Therefore, to say that expenditure on education, public expenditure on education is adequate is a far-fetched idea. But then, the policy clearly mentions that state has its own role and responsibility to play. But education in India is not an industry. Education in India is for charity. Education in India is not a commercial entity on which trade and profit making is permitted. It is taken to be sacrosanct. And therefore, private sector operation of the private capital in education with a philanthropic approach is the one harbinger and a hallmark of propagation of the cause of education. To say that the entire education will be the responsibility of the state and it will be the public expenditure out of which all the levels of education for the entire eligible population will be worked out is neither open nor permissible. Therefore, education policy clearly stipulates that education is a punya karma. Education is imparting of education is a national duty. It is not only the duty of the state. The citizenship is also responsible for catering to this larger cause of progression and propagation of education, for which philanthropic approach turns out to be one of the important modalities which has been emphasized in no uncertain terms. And by and large, the growth of private capital in education as a complementary state over a period of time in last 25-30 years has equally turned out to be an equal responsibility sharing partner. And therefore, public-private partnership mode with philanthropic approach is the trinity which is expected to be catering to the burden of education at all levels in our country. And that particular vision is indicated in the NEP 2020.
धन्यवाद सर। अब हमारे अगले प्रश्न के लिए आमंत्रित करते हैं साकिब को।
मेरा आपसे अगला सवाल होगा नई शिक्षा नीति की विभिन्न नीतियों में हॉलिस्टिक लर्निंग शब्द का कई बार उल्लेख किया गया है। इस शब्द का प्रयोग हमें नई शिक्षा नीति में किस ओर इंगित करता है?
मैं समझता हूं कि इस नई शिक्षा नीति की आत्मा अगर कहीं बसी हुई है तो उस शिक्षा नीति के अंतर्गत जो होलिस्टिक शब्द का प्रयोग शिक्षा के दिशा निर्देश के रूप में किया गया है वो उसकी पूर्ण रूपेण आत्मा है। होलिस्टिक के तात्पर्य से दो अर्थ नई शिक्षा नीति के अंतर्गत संदर्भित किए गए हैं। एक, लर्निंग कैन नॉट बी इन पीसेस एंड फ्रैगमेंट्स, इट हैज टू बी इन होल, इट हैज टू बी इन एन एब्सोल्यूट सेंस। Therefore, जैसा मैंने आपसे कहा, करिकुलम मेकिंग, करिकुलम डिजाइनिंग, करिकुलम स्ट्रक्चरिंग, मल्टी डिसिप्लिनरी कैरेक्टर का तात्पर्य होलिस्टिक नीति का एक अंग है। वन आर्म ऑफ इट इज होलिस्टिक अप्रोच इज an integrated approach in terms of not only teaching and learning of the monolithic syllabus, but also in terms of integration of relevant disciplines, and where this integration is not expected to be core integration, putting it across in the form of free floating electives. ये पहला होलिस्टिक प्रारूप है। एक मैकेनिकल साइंस का विद्यार्थी केवल ये रोबोटिक साइंस के लिए नहीं बना हुआ है, केवल और केवल अप्लाइड साइंस का विद्यार्थी अप्लाइड साइंस के लिए नहीं बना हुआ है। जिंदगी के अंतर्गत शिक्षा के संदर्भ में आर्ट भी होगा, साइंस भी होगा, सोशल साइंस भी होगा, कला भी होगा, संस्कृति भी होगी, विज्ञान भी होगा, तर्क भी होगा, दर्शन भी होगा। दिस इज व्हाट इज कॉल्ड एज होलिस्टिक लर्निंग। वो हमें सेगमेंट्स के अंतर्गत बांटना नहीं चाहता, वो हमारे सर्वांगीण सोच के विकास की बात करता है, ताकि वह सर्वस्पर्शी भी हो और मर्मस्पर्शी भी हो। वह जो सर्वस्पर्शी होगी उसका औचित्य सर्वस्पर्श के साथ है, और जो मर्मस्पर्श है वो हार्दिकता के इन्वॉल्वमेंट के साथ है। ये उसका पहला भाग। होलिस्टिक का दूसरा भाग, जिसको लेकर के मीगर एकेडमिक्स इज नॉट द परपोर्ट ऑफ द एनईपी 2020। आपको याद है 1986 के एजुकेशन पॉलिसी डॉक्यूमेंट में जिस बात का इंडिकेटिव औचित्य साधा गया था, उसको एक नई पूर्णता का स्वरूप इस शिक्षा नीति के अंतर्गत दिया गया है। वहां कहा गया था कि लर्निंग इज नॉट विद इन द फोर वॉल्स, द वॉल्स गेट एक्सटेंडेड इनटू द प्लेग्राउंड where also learning takes place. Therefore, it is not just an extension activity, it is also an add-on curricular activity and not a co-curricular activity. प्ले फील्ड के अंतर्गत एक समता, समरसता, एक रूपता का जो पाठ मैं प्लेग्राउंड में पढ़ता हूं, वो कदाचित क्लासरूम की बौद्धिक पुस्तकों के अंतर्गत मुझे नहीं मिल पाएगा। ये सर्वांगीण विकास का तात्पर्य नई शिक्षा नीति के अंतर्गत अगर मैं दो शब्दों के अंतर्गत समझाऊं तो नई शिक्षा नीति ने महात्मा गांधी की बुनियादी तालीम की जो संकल्पना उन्होंने सेवाग्राम कॉन्फ्रेंस के अंतर्गत जो उस समय डॉक्टर जाकिर हुसैन की अध्यक्षता में की गई, उसे इंगित किया था, उसका रूपांतरण इस नई एजुकेशन पॉलिसी में हुआ है। होलिस्टिक एजुकेशन का अर्थ मैं जो समझता हूं और जो पॉलिसी में ध्वनित है वो है, एजुकेशन डज नॉट मीन एजुकेशन ऑफ हेड, एजुकेशन ऑल्सो मीन्स एजुकेशन ऑफ हैंड, एंड एजुकेशन ऑफ हेड एंड हैंड has to be blended with education of heart. Therefore, when the education is for head, when the education is also for hands, and when the education along with head and hands is also for heart, that is developing the head, developing the hands, and developing the heart. It is an integrated development of head, hands, and heart, which Gandhiji said in Bunyadi Talim is absolutely echoed and operationally reflected in the word holistic propounded in the National Education Policy 2020. Therefore, I humbly say holistic, this word has got two arms. One is the curricular and structural arm, and second is the operational arm.
Now wait. Just a second.
धन्यवाद सर। हम और आप एक महत्वपूर्ण कार्यक्रम के साक्षात्कार हुए। अब हम आमंत्रित करते हैं आयुष को।
जब शिक्षा नीति को तैयार किया जा रहा था तब कोविड नहीं आया था और अब कोविड के बाद दुनिया में भारी परिवर्तन आया है। अब डिजिटल आदि में कुछ प्रतिशत लोग खुद को सहज महसूस कर रहे हैं। ऐसे में नई शिक्षा नीति 2020 कैसे असरदायी होगी?
देखिए, आप मान करके चलिए कि शिक्षा नीति 2020 के अंतर्गत बन करके प्रसारित हो गई थी। इसलिए हम ये मान करके चले कि कोविड के पैंडेमिक का इम्पैक्ट शिक्षा नीति के सुझावों के अंतर्गत अंतर्भूत है। ये सामयिकता की दृष्टि से भी औचित्यपूर्ण नहीं हो सकता। यह वस्तुतः हकीकत की स्थिति है कि निश्चित तौर पर इस पूरे आपदा के दौरान वर्चुअल रियलिटी ही रियल रियलिटी के रूप में उभरी और ये अपने आप में एक अभिशाप नहीं रहा। सारी दुनिया को इंक्लूडिंग डेवलपिंग वर्ल्ड को टेक्नोलॉजिकल बेस पर भी एजुकेशन की महत्ता, महात्म्य और ऑपरेशन यह संभव है और यह किया जा सकता है। यह प्रदीर्घ अनुभव कोविड के दौरान हमें मिला और नई शिक्षा नीति इंफॉर्मेशन एंड कम्युनिकेशन टेक्नोलॉजी एंड इट्स जुडिशियस यूज की बात का इशारा जो ध्वनित करती है, उसका तात्पर्य यह है कि वर्चुअल सिमुलेशन भी एजुकेशन की प्रोप्राइटी का और एजुकेशन की मोडालिटी का एक अविभाज्य अंग है और इसका अब अंग होना इस वस्तुस्थिति के अनुभव के कारण केवल लाजमी नहीं, नैसर्गिक भी हो गया है। इसलिए नई शिक्षा नीति के क्रियान्वयन की प्रक्रिया का जो डॉक्यूमेंट बनेगा, निश्चित तौर पर मैं आपको कह सकता हूं कि उसके अंतर्गत judicious use of technology and judicious use of informational technology, including use of simulation methods and availing of the virtual reality for the purposes of teaching, training, learning, assessment and extension, it will be there and it has to be there. क्योंकि जो तांत्रिक टेक्नोलॉजिकल दिशा निर्देश दुनिया को मिला है, उसकी ओर आंख मूंद करके अब शिक्षा के प्रारूप और शिक्षा के दिग्दर्शन को दिशा देना संभव नहीं है। इसलिए आप मान करके चलें कि 2-2.5 वर्षों के अंतर्गत वह अनुभव जो कंपल्शन के तौर पर आया, उसका औचित्यपूर्ण उपयोग एक आवश्यक सदुपयोग की दृष्टि से शिक्षा नीति के क्रियान्वयन में निर्धारित होगा। इसमें कहीं किसी कोई प्रकार के किंतु और परंतु की गुंजाइश मुझे नजर नहीं आती।
Thank you, sir. Moving on, I would like to invite Archit to ask his next question.
Sir, my next question would be, how will the changes at the undergraduate level affect post-graduation courses?
Question of alteration of the levels, again I am telling you, see, hitherto we have been taking education as a definite degree of segmentation, which perhaps was the way we have been looking towards it because we thought that ultimately education has to be invoked in the form of a ladder. Here is a continuum of education. See, we demarcate it separately. Do you mean to say that a postgraduate certification is of higher quality than undergraduation? No. Please try to understand the pyramid of knowledge. What is expertise? Expertise or what is expert knowledge? It has been very beautifully defined, and that's exactly should be the basis on which I would like to answer your question. An expert is not an extraordinary person. An expert is one who has learned the art of knowing more and more about less and less. It is that simple. When I am talking of a course which is undergraduate, I am talking of multiplicity. But when I am coning down, it is a pyramidic approach where the base is broad and the apex will always be narrow. When I will be contemplating a doctoral degree, or a postdoctoral degree, I will be reducing myself into a thematic area of a defined expertise, which will not be covering the entire spectrum of knowledge. So it is not conversion or upgradation or degradation. It is the tapering continuum of knowledge, which is a natural process where, as I ascend up in the ladder, the narrowing down has to take place inevitably. It is not just the fallacy of the structure. It is absolutely the flow of the tapering in terms of the expertise. And therefore, the best dictum to decipher is the quest for knowing more and more about less and less makes you not jack of all trades, but master of one.
धन्यवाद सर। अर्चित के इस प्रश्न पर प्राप्त उत्तर के साथ अब हम आमंत्रित करते हैं सागरिका को।
Here is my third question. How do you see multiple entry and exit system in new education policy 2020? Do you see any shortcomings in the particular point of the NEP?
The shortcomings would have been there in case academic bank of credits concept would not have been there. The fact that banking of credit is clearly provided for in the educational policy document, I am exiting maybe because of my compulsion. See, today, contemplate a domestic situation which puts me into peril where progression of the further education for me is not possible at the given point of time. And I'm in the mid of my education. I would have been doomed for life. My entire propagation till that particular point of time would have gone a begging. But here is the situation. If I am completing a particular level in the ladder, I am exiting out with a certification. As I said, in an undergraduate course, I can exit out at the end of 1 year with a certificate, wherein defined competencies are there, and not that that certificate is the end of story for me. The credits of that certificate are deposited in my name in Academic Bank of Credit. Any adverse situation over, I am with those credits back, making a collateral entry at level 2 and carrying further the progression. Therefore, I have retained the credits. I have rejoined the mainstream. These credits are add-on credits on which I am in a position to progress further. So therefore, it is not a fallacy. With the concept of academic banking of credits, it is almost like an educational currency. Now my assessment and my certification is not in the form of a certificate. It is in the form of currency which is deposited in my name, which I can cash at any and all points of time. Mind well, there is no restriction that if I have opted out, I have to be back by what time, and in case I am not back, I have lost forever. No, my bank credit is alive, and therefore I can be back at any and every point of time with that particular punji of mine intact for the purposes of further add-on. Therefore, I think academic bank of credits and formulation of the credit assessment along with internationalization of credit is a real essence of globalization of education, because that particular retention of mine will not only be valid in the Indian context. If my credits are on par with the international credits, they are absolutely transferable across the boundaries in the entire world. Therefore, in a sense, this modality has opened the doors for globalization of the learner in a real sense, rather than it being counterproductive or restrictive in any manner.
And now we have Saket with us for the last question of the second episode of Fire Talk.
मेरा आपसे अगला सवाल है, भारतीय समाज में सरकारी और निजी विद्यालयों के बीच भारी दूरियां दिखाई देती हैं। एक तरफ चमकते 7 सितारा विद्यालय हैं, तो दूसरी तरफ बैठने को भी मोहताज विद्यार्थी। ऐसे में इस दूरी को भरने में नई शिक्षा नीति का क्या भूमिका निभा पाएगी?
देखिए, ये बात बिल्कुल सही है कि हम एक्सेस की बात करते हैं, परंतु यह इक्विटी का अभाव है। और इसीलिए मैंने आपसे कहा कि नई शिक्षा नीति का वैशिष्ट एक शिक्षा क्षेत्र के छोटे से कार्यकर्ता जिसने जीवन के 4 दशक उसके अंतर्गत अर्पित किए हों, मेरी स्पष्ट धारणा है कि एक्सेस यह प्राप्ति का संदर्भ है, परंतु एक्सेस में अगर इक्विटी नहीं होगी तो वह एक्सेस अर्थहीन है। और निश्चित तौर के ऊपर में अगर हम देखें तो सुविधाओं की दृष्टि से अनेक संदर्भों के अंतर्गत ये दूरियां बहुत व्यापक हैं। इन दूरियों को पब्लिक फंडिंग के माध्यम से दूर किया जाना अनिवार्य है और यह नई शिक्षा नीति के अंतर्गत निर्धारित है। नई शिक्षा नीति के अंतर्गत इंक्रीमेंटल डेवलपमेंट ऑफ एजुकेशन थ्रू कमेंसरेट एप्रोप्रिएशन ऑफ पब्लिक मनी, इसका स्पष्ट उल्लेख किया गया है, इसलिए दिशा निर्देश उसके अंतर्गत है। परंतु फिर मैं आपसे कहना चाहता हूं, यह जो दूरियां हैं, यह जो अंतर है, ये बहुत बड़ा है। एकाएक ही हम मान करके चलें कि नई शिक्षा नीति के अंतर्गत ऐसा कोई जादू का मसला बसा हुआ है जो बिल्कुल अलादीन के चिराग की तरह घिसा गया और बिल्कुल जिन्न बाहर आकर उसने सारी दूरियों को पाट दिया, यह संभव नहीं है। और इसीलिए फिलैंथ्रोपी की बात जो नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी के अंतर्गत कही गई, वह इन दूरियों को पाटने की दृष्टि से भी औचित्य का एक मार्ग है। और इसलिए सामाजिक उदारता और सरकारी जिम्मेदारी, इन दोनों के बीच का सामंजस्य ही इन दूरियों को पाटने में असरकार साबित हो सकता है और उसके होने की अपेक्षा नई शिक्षा नीति करती है। इसलिए नई शिक्षा नीति के अंतर्गत इसके क्रियान्वयन की दृष्टि से पुनः मैं उस ओर लौटता हूं। 1952 के अंतर्गत जो रिकमेंडेशन था कि प्रत्येक 5 वर्ष के अंतर्गत देश के शिक्षा पर 6% जीडीपी का सार्वजनिक खर्च होना अनिवार्य है। हमें उस मार्ग पर सरकारों को लौटना होगा और उस पर लौटकर ही निश्चित तौर पर आज शिक्षा पर किया जाने वाला खर्च, इसमें जब तक बढ़ोतरी नहीं होगी तब तक यह सार्वजनिक हित के लिए इस अंतर को पाटा जाना संभव नहीं। परंतु एकांगी उस माध्यम से ही यह अंतर पट जाएगा, यह मानना भी औचित्य से परे है। इसलिए सामाजिक उदारता निश्चित तौर पर फिलैंथ्रोपी के रूप में प्रोपोगेट करके ही हम इस दूरी को दोहरे आर्म टैक्टिक्स के साथ में निश्चित तौर पर इसे टैकल कर सकते हैं, ऐसी अपेक्षा नई शिक्षा नीति के अंतर्गत है और इसे लेकर हमें आशावादी होना चाहिए।
धन्यवाद सर। वाइस टॉक यानी सवालों से जवाबों का सफर, और आज भी कुछ ऐसा ही हुआ। हमारे विद्यार्थी साथियों ने नई शिक्षा नीति पर आदरणीय मिश्रा सर से खुलकर अपने विचारों को प्रश्न के रूप में प्रस्तुत किया और उस प्रश्न का उन्हें सही मार्गदर्शन प्राप्त हुआ। अब हम आदरणीय डॉक्टर वेद प्रकाश मिश्रा जी से अनुरोध करते हैं कि महोदय, आप आज के चर्चात्मक कार्यक्रम पर अपना अनुभव रखते हुए हम सभी का मार्गदर्शन करें।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। मैं अगर मेरे शब्दों में कहूं तो आप सभी से वार्तालाप कर मैंने आपको इतना सूचित किया, इस विषय में बिना कोई पूर्व निर्धार किए हुए आपकी जिज्ञासाओं ने मुझे निश्चित तौर पर आशान्वित किया है। जब युवा मन नीतियों को लेकर इस प्रकार केवल चिंता व्यक्त करने की जगह चिंतन करता है तो निश्चित तौर पर आशा का स्फुल्लिंग साफ दिखाई देता है। आपके मन में केवल और केवल चिंता नहीं थी, आपने इन विषयों पर मौलिक चिंतन किया था। उस चिंतन के आधार पर आपके मन में निश्चित तौर पर जो प्रश्नार्थक संदर्भ थे उनको आपने खुलकर सामने रखा और मुझे यथाशक्ति मैंने मेरी समझ के अनुरूप उन प्रश्नों को उत्तरित करने का प्रयत्न किया। मेरे लिए अत्यंत एक सुखद अनुभव है। जिंदगी के इस पड़ाव पर आप जैसे तमाम युवा मनों के चिंतनों का उत्तर और उसके दिए जाने का उत्तरदायित्व निभा पाना, मैं समझता हूं अपने आप में एक अभय और वरदान से कहीं बड़ा मेरी दृष्टि में मुझे महसूस होता है। एंड देयरफॉर इन ऑल कैंडिड acceptance, I have no hesitation in putting across, indeed, pious talk, would turn out to be one of the memorable events in my life, which I shall not only uphold, but I shall rever. Because it has triggered a sense of very pragmatic optimism in my mind that younger generations are keenly looking up to these prepositions with not only a sense of concern, but also with a sense of responsive and responsible inquisition. It's in that context what Dr. Abdul Kalam ji said, that yes, 21st century has to belong to India. Your inquisition has emboldened me to reiterate what he said. He said, it must belong to India. I say, with young ignited minds that all of you possess, that young ignited mind which is so keen on inquisition, that inquisition which look up to illumination, and that illumination which ultimately is expected to be ending up not only in a glow, but a glowing glow, is the real path which would make Mother India a real superpower in the domain of turning out to be a Vishwaguru in the 21st century, in which young minds like yours would be the upholding factors holding it to that supremacy. Believe me, it's an unforgettable experience which I will always harbor in my mind, unerasable, inerasable in nature and character. I would love to be in reverence of these sweet memories of today's talk. God bless you all.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your experience with us and encouraging us. As we come to the end of the second episode of Pious Talk, I would like to invite our respected principal, Mr. Suresh Balakrishnan, to address the gathering with his enlightening words.
Dear children, I go really speechless because second to second, even fractions of second, I was engrossed into what sir was saying. I don't know whether I really was following his thoughts. Rather, I was impressed with the way he presented the thoughts. Rather than the thoughts, I was impressed with the way the thoughts were presented, I would say. So, without any doubt, I feel you all, the young generation, should give this well-deserving proud son of India a standing ovation. Please. A standing ovation, please. That's great. That's great. So I would say, children, why I said I was speechless. See, when a speaker speaks, it is not from his mouth, the words, the voice comes. Okay, when you're passionate, your words and your voice comes from your heart. And I felt it. That made me speechless. The insight, okay, from somewhere you are taking some questions and you are just throwing it open before the speaker without waiting for a moment. The correct, expected, convincing answer comes spontaneously as if it were from a fountain. This is the insight I was impressed with. Look at the clarity, whether it is Hindi or English. To be frank, I'm an illiterate in Hindi, but I did feel, though I didn't understand what sir said in Hindi, I felt it. I got it. I feel like I got it. A kind of a soul-to-soul connection he could draw through his thoughts and words. The enthusiasm. When a speaker speaks, children, if you have an intention to become a public speaker, learn from sir today. When you take up a topic, you should have this kind of an enthusiasm, right? It is with a lot of respect and humility that we stand and sit in front of this great personality. But at this age, the energy and the enthusiasm that's demonstrated for the last 60 minutes, exact 60 and more minutes, admirable, sir. And the humility, he did use the word humility as well. Can you imagine of this kind of an insightful, knowledgeable person of great experience come down? This must be the reason why Kalidasa said, when the branch of the tree bears a lot of fruits, it comes down. The branch comes down. Learn it today that humility should be your benchmark of great personality and nobility. And the commitment, finally. So who would find a man of this kind of great busy schedule would find full length 60 and more minutes reporting 10 minutes before, interacting with you informally, connecting making the connection between the two generations and spending quality time, I have to say, totally free of cost. Totally free of cost, because his commitment is to his nation. His commitment is to the generation. And he did underscore the point. He did underscore the point. Don't forget it. 21st century is meant for India. He has been quoting two great personalities, just like him, the other two proud sons of India. One Mahatma Ji and the other APJ Abdul Kalam. Don't ever forget those two. And add one more, Dr. Ved Prakash Mishra, truly committed to his nation and truly committed to the young minds of India. He has really set the young mind on fire. That is what he said. Set on fire. I forget about NEP, but I duly remember what all things, the ways are set, presented the idea, the transparency of it, the equity part of it, the accessibility part of it, the quality part of it, and the accountability part of it. Give me one more day to talk about this, because overwhelmed. I am really, really overwhelmed. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have to put into our words our experience this evening. पाइस टॉक के दूसरे संस्करण में हम भारतीय विद्या भवन अबू धाबी की तरफ से डॉक्टर वेद प्रकाश मिश्रा जी का आभार व्यक्त करते हैं कि आपने अपना कीमती समय दिया और हम सभी का मार्गदर्शन किया.
धन्यवाद sir. We would also like to thank the management of the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan Middle East for providing us with a platform to express ourselves even as we interact with experts in the field. We also like to thank our school principal, Suresh Balakrishnan sir, vice principals and assistant vice principals for always being very supportive. Thank you. धन्यवाद के साथ ही आज के इस पाइस टॉक में रुकते हैं और मुलाकात करेंगे अगले महीने नए मेहमान और नए विषय के साथ. तब तक अपना ख्याल रखें, स्वस्थ रहें और खुश रहें. धन्यवाद.